I've worked with peptides for the past almost 7 years now. It's a storytelling about peptides. There's an influencer who has no medical degree, no science background, and he's there with the ring lights, very confident, talking about this peptide is going to make you this, and this peptide is going to make you that. And I'm like, what? You know why your grandma is still alive? Because her cells are still producing ATP.
So is aging reversible in your opinion?
On the mice right now, yes. So when people get a raw material from China, that's what they get. Peptide with the LPS on it. Peptides, they're not a miracle molecules. They're an addition to your wellness, to your lifestyle.
One peptide every person over 35 should know about. Before we dive in, a quick word about this community we're building together. The Peptides Podcast exists solely to educate. We work incredibly hard to bring you the best guests in the space, doctors, researchers, pharmacists, innovators, because we genuinely believe that access to the right information can change lives. If this show is adding value to your life, please subscribe, leave us a review, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. That's how we grow, and that's how we keep bringing you the real conversations. Now, a quick note before we get into it. Everything on this show is for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing here is medical advice, and nothing we discuss is intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition. Peptide therapies and the topics we cover may be regulated differently depending on where you live, and results may vary from person to person. So please work with a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Peptides Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Brudzewski, and I want to start episode 1 a little differently. I'm not going to open with a list of credentials or tell you that this is the most important podcast you'll ever hear. I'm going to tell you why I'm here. I got into this world the way a lot of people do, not through a textbook, but through a personal experience. I started asking questions about my own health, my own performance, my aging process, and I just kept running into the same wall. The information out there is just too surface level or buried in research papers that weren't written for the rest of us. So I built this show, a place where real experts, clinicians, scientists, practitioners are in the trenches every day, and they can sit down now and have an honest conversation about the things that actually matter right here. And for episode 1, I could not have asked for a better person to start this journey with. My guest today is a clinician, a researcher, and one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever had the chance to speak with in the world of longevity and preventative medicine. She's a PhD in Russia, a PAC, and a strong scientific background, and her journey into research began through a patient advocacy, where she became deeply involved in a rare disease research project and worked alongside scientists and physicians from around the world to help advance new therapeutic discoveries. Today, she practices here in Miami at Ideal Wellness, where she focuses on preventative medicine, hormone optimization, longevity, and regenerative therapies. She's also someone who's not afraid to challenge misinformation and bring science-backed education to the public, something that's more important now than ever. Ksenia Petrushkina, welcome to the Peptides Podcast. So excited that you're here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to be here.
Good. Let's get right into this. You have a really unique background, and I want to talk about that. Tell us about your experience going into research and then eventually the journey that started to where you are today.
Sure. Um, I can't remember where exactly it was. Did it start in 2013 or 2012? I was teaching biology. I was tutoring biology, math, while going through my bachelor's degree. And a family found me, and a mother asked, "Can you teach me biology of NF2?" And I said, "What's NF2?" And she said, "Well, why don't you Google it?" And I said, "Okay, give me a few days, I'll do my homework." And as I was reading about the disease, I got so excited because that disease, the mutation, let's say the genetics of this disease, it is similar across all cancers.
For our listeners out there, what is NF2?
Neurofibromatosis type 2, it's a condition usually affected by children where benign tumors grow inside the head, meningioma, schwannoma. Those are two main tumors that they're benign, but again, they grow on the specific nerves that they cannot be really operated on. If, let's say, the tumor is removed, the child often becomes deaf or blind. It's debilitating disease, unfortunately. And I decided to help the mother and teach her everything that I could in, well, biology of the disease itself. And then we started to look where can we find the support, and we found Harvard. Mass General is the only institution here in the United States that actually have the research on NF2. And I contacted Harvard. I went to the conference, and we started building the cell line for that child, the specific mutation. And my job was theoretical. I had to collaborate with all over the world with many, many scientists who worked on specific, let's say, cancers, but they worked on specific pathways that involved in NF2. Let's say pancreatic cancer in somewhere MIT, they work on that. So I had to contact that research and say, listen, we have a cell line with NF2. Can you run your experiment on our cell line? And then I would share the results with Harvard. With that, well, because child became a doctor, a patient of Mass General. Dr. Plotkin was one of the doctors. Beautiful mind, and that's how my research took off. I mean, I did. It was very, very interesting. I didn't sleep. It, j- I get excited when I talk about that. It was really, really interesting, and I was collaborating. Then we hired a lab in Canada where they would work on our cell mutation, and we would ship the cell line all over the world. And yeah, just to help the cause. NF2 is a really rare disease, and
Hmm.
when it affects children, unfortunately, and we still have no treatment for that disease.
I love that you're passionate about all of this, and I can tell that just from your content, and that's why I love that you're our first guest here. So let's talk about ideal medical wellness, your practice. When you have a typical patient, what does it look like when they walk in your door, and what are they usually trying to solve when they come to see you?
I don't feel like myself. That's the usual, complaint that I get. And my patients are usually between 35 and 60 years old, and most of them would complain of fatigue, would
Hmm.
complain of something have changed. I don't feel like myself, and that's when we start. We start with labs, of course.
Hmm. Very cool. So I love your social media. You're very active, and you always like to talk about evidence-based medicine and calling out misinformation. Let's talk about that. What made you decide to publicly start to call that out? And was there a moment that just pushed you to say, okay, I'm going to go out there and start to, do social media and get my word out there?
If you look at my Instagram, I started in January, but before January, I was just scrolling the Instagram, and I'm scrolling, and I see all these influencers talking about peptides, and I've worked with peptides for the past almost 7 years now, and they just telling it's a storytelling,
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
peptides. There's an influencer who has no medical degree, no science background, and he's there with the ring lights, very confident, talking about this peptide is going to make you this, and this peptide is going to make you that. And I'm like, what? And so I was like, no, it does not. Or yes, it does, but not in that context. Context really matter. And I thought I should get out there and start talking the truth.
That's cool. Well, for our audience today, I want to make sure that everyone understands aging. And before we get into peptides and protocols, let's talk about a little bit of the science of aging. So, at a cellular and biological level, what's aging and what is actually going inside the body as we're getting older?
Well, aging is not a one thing, of course. I would say it's accumulation of damage across all systems within our body. Starting with, of course, mitochondrial health. When you get older, your mitochondria not stop, but the production of ATP declines, and now that contributes a lot to cell death, of course. Inflammation, huge thing. You name it. There's so many factors. People say, "Oh, there's a peptide that lengthen your telomeres, and this will stop aging." Unfortunately, it's just not one thing. It's telomeres. It's inflammation. It's cellular damage. It's misfolding of the protein. It's DNA mutation. I mean, there's just cascade of things that involved in aging.
So, you focus a lot on mitochondrial health. Why are they crucial in aging and what happens with them over time?
You know why your grandma is still alive? Because her cells are still producing ATP. And what's producing ATP? It's mitochondria.
Hmm.
So we are alive because of mitochondria. If we look at the bigger picture, mitochondria produces ATP. ATP is used to fuel us. Every cell in our body, the heart, the lungs, the liver, everything, your brain. ATP is it's the gas, for your car. That's what ATP is for us.
So is aging reversible in your opinion?
On the mice right now, yes. Well, if we don't have any evidence in humans, of course, but we do have evidence in petri dish, on a cell line, on some rodent models that we can reverse some damage. And it's very exciting because and promising because one day, and I believe one day we will reverse the blindness. We will reverse some genetic mutation that leads to faster aging. And it's very exciting.
Yeah, I did see that there's that study that is now focused now on reversing age to see if it's possible on the human study. So it's a lot of exciting things going on in
Yes.
that space. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see what they come up with as far as results go. So this show today is our first episode, and it's focused on peptides, of course, and the science of that. But there's a lot of people out there I talk to almost every single day, and they're like, "I have heard about it, but what is a peptide?" So let's talk about that. What is a peptide for all of our listeners and give it to them in maybe the simplest way?
Sure, I like to describe it the way I describe it to my patient. Think of your body as a Lego. So many little, like million, probably billions of little pieces that you put together, and that's what human being is. So those Legos are peptides. Peptides is just a short chain of amino acids from 2 to 75, maybe. Imagine a string with the beans on it. So 2 to 75 would be peptide. Something longer than 75 will be polypeptide. And those peptides act as a messengers. So you all heard about BPC-157 or any other peptide, and when you inject it, what happens? What happens when you inject peptide? It's a message, so your body needs to read that message. So peptide is not a pharmaceutical drug. Well, some of them are GLPs, but most of the peptide that we're here to talk about are peptides that are right now became so popular. So peptide is just a message for your body to create something that you're lacking.
So this is something that people should pay attention to.
Absolutely. Peptides can turn on your genetics and can influence hormone release. For example, your growth hormone is released by GnRH. That's a peptide. Also, if a woman, when she ovulates, FSH and agent is involved, and that is influenced by also GnRH through the brain. So peptides influence a lot of things in our body. Absolutely, we should be focusing a lot our attention to peptides.
So in your practice, let's talk about which peptides do you use the most? And if someone comes to your practice, what's the ones that you think that have the strongest evidence behind them that you guys use the most?
I would say GLP-1s. We had Ozempic, which was the GLP-1. Then well, it was created dual agonist, tirzepatide, which is GLP-1 and GIP, and retatrutide right now is in the clinical trials. Is a three three agonists, but we're not gonna talk about that much because we cannot really use that. So we'll talk about tirzepatide. That's the most I use that the most in my practice. Um, Other peptides would be after the GLPs will be tesamorelin.
Hmm.
And after tesamorelin, the most that we use would be probably thymosin alpha.
I see. So let's talk about some of the ones out there that people have probably heard about quite often. GHK-Cu, GLP-1s you already talked about, CJC Ipamorelin. It's kind of up there with tesamorelin. Do you use any of these and what do these do?
Sure, we do use GHK-Cu. Um, the one thing about GHK-Cu, it stings upon injections.
Hmm.
So not everybody would stick to it.
Hmm.
We would, unfortunately, to see the results, probably people should use it for 8 weeks on
Hmm.
average, but I used it myself. It does really sting.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you ever injected it.
Hmm.
Um, but that's a great potential. That peptide has a great potential with a collagen and elastin production.
Hmm.
Also, people with structural damage of their joints, they would benefit from that peptide
Wow,
because it
interesting.
rebuilds the fibroblast.
Hmm.
Fibroblast is what your cartilage um, cartilage is partly made of fibroblasts. So those are the cells that are responsible for rebuilding the broken tendons, ligaments. Another peptides would be peptide like that would be BPC-157. Copper and BPC-157, I would say structurally, they do heal
Hmm.
the tissue similarly.
So I have a question and I would love your answer. This is something that you see out there. There's a peptide that is popular called Glow. What's your opinion on do you mix GHK-Cu with BPC and TB500 or should you do those separately? I'm just curious on your
From
opinion.
the chemical standpoint, you don't mix them. I don't think you because copper peptide pH is very acidic. If you look at BPC and TB, their pH is not as acidic. So there is a risk of denaturation. There is a risk of cross reaction.
Hmm.
And people say, no, the stability, we send it to the testing for stability. Stability is just one of the things, but you have to look at the broader, bigger picture. It's not only stability. None of the tests can show you if there is a chemical reaction occurred and if there is a new now chemical that has been made. Nobody can show that.
Gotcha. So what
I
are
say, no, don't mix.
okay, no mix. So you hear that from Dr. Ksenia. So for things that people get wrong about peptides, let's talk about what the biggest misconception is that you see online that just sticks out in your head.
The biggest misconception is that people think peptides will fix everything.
Hmm.
And I have lots of examples. For example, a 60-year-old woman would come to my office and she would say, I feel like crap. I need the peptides. I heard on the internet I need the peptides. And I would say, maybe peptides is not the first thing we should look at.
Hmm.
We should look at your hormones because you're postmenopausal. So the reason you feel like crap is because you are lacking estrogen, progesterone, and those hormones that used to make you feel the way you used to feel when you felt good. And I always say, if you're at certain age, over 50, over 45, let's focus on HRT first, and then we'll add peptides because peptides, they're not a miracle molecules, they're an addition to your wellness, to your lifestyle.
So let's focus now a little bit on longevity. There's a lot of talk about longevity, health, and wellness. And being here in Miami, it's one of the hearts of the longevity, health, and wellness community. We now have, I mean, a week dedicated to wellness, which is very cool. So when a patient comes to you and they say, I want to work on longevity, like what's going through the process of the conversation with that patient, and what do you kind of start with when you talk about a longevity focus with a patient?
Absolutely, we start with blood work. Longevity is not one thing. We have to look at their lipid profile. We have to look at their thyroid health. We have to look at their female and male hormones. You have to look at the whole picture. And based on the picture, let's say a person has high triglycerides. Would we put them on peptides? Probably we'll talk about the lifestyle first. Why do you have elevated cholesterol? What's your diet looks like? What's your exercise regimen? And trust me, every other person comes to my office do not exercise really. And then we have to start from the beginning.
So exercise obviously is very
It's
important still,
very,
no matter what.
of course,
You
it's very
always hear motion is medicine.
exactly.
And so when you decide to introduce a peptide into someone's protocol, tell me about that transition when you think it's fit for somebody.
Most of the time they ask me to.
Hmm.
Most of the time. And a lot of people don't know about the peptides, and we do have some advertisement in the office, and people would ask me, "Oh, I heard about." And usually, yes, people do hear about peptides, but they just don't know what peptide. And they come, "I need the peptide NAD." Well, NAD is not a peptide; it's a cofactor. I need that. I need this, and education. That's where I start. I start educating people what they need, and I would say, "Okay, I want BPC 157." Okay, why do you want BPC? Oh, my shoulder hurts, or my that hurts, or I need MAT-C to lose weight. So, and misconception is people think that that peptide is doing one thing, but in reality, and one important thing about peptides, no single peptide act on one pathway. Each peptide will act on more than four pathways. So do not think that one peptide will do just one thing in your body. Unfortunately, not. Peptides that we have right now, especially on the gray market, not tested, not pure, they're not going to just affect one thing. They can affect multiple
Hmm.
system across your body.
So let's talk about a little bit when you make that decision and you think peptides are right for a patient. What does that conversation look like? You get their blood work, you introduce the peptide, and then you have someone that wants to start, let's say, GHK-Cu, and maybe they get that reaction, they're stinging. What do you tell them what it is and how to continue to maybe address that? And is there ways to maybe get through that? Because that's something I hear that's very common.
Yes, of course, there is a way to minimize the reaction. First of all, copper cold, when it's cold out of the fridge. It can shock your when you inject subcutaneously, it can shock the tissue because of its cold and because of the low acid pH. So warm it up. I would say if you withdraw the syringe, leave it on the counter for 20-30 minutes and then inject. The reaction is, well, when it comes to copper, most likely it's acidity.
Hmm.
But we can talk about other reactions from the gray market or from the black market. If you know peptides that are not pure, there is a molecule called LPS, lipopolysaccharides, that attach to every peptide.
Hmm.
What it does, it's very pro-inflammatory. So when people get the raw material from China, that's what they get. They get a peptide with the LPS on it. And here in the United States, we have compounding pharmacies, and you know about, I'm sure about that. Peptide goes through the process of being cleaned, of being purified, and that's when liposaccharides have been discarded. And usually after that, you shouldn't have any reaction.
Hmm.
But you do hear on internet, I injected BPC, I injected CJC, I injected MOTS-c, and I have welts. That's what it is. It's lipopolysaccharides irritating the hell out of your body and creating more inflammation than needed. If you injected that for a week, it's okay. But if you keep injecting it for a few weeks, it's going to create not what you want it to create. It's going to create a lot of inflammation when you're trying to detox peptides to reduce the inflammation. So this is so counterproductive.
Is there anything else besides warming it up that could be an helpful tip for, let's say, someone taking
Diluting
JJs?
it with more bacteriostatic water. So don't inject it so dilute it.
Hmm.
Use more water, maybe more volume and less and more frequently than less frequently that less volume.
That's a good tip.
Yes.
What about matzi? I hear that one also is, let's say, spicy. Is there any tricks to matzi similar? Would it be warm it up and add a little bit more water? Is there something different for matzi?
Again, I haven't used Matsi now in 3 years because it's not available through our compounding pharmacies. But when I have used it, I've never had that reaction.
Hmm.
And when we had patient on it, we've never had that reaction.
Hmm.
It's very interesting.
Interesting.
Yes.
So, as far as when people are taking these products and you're taking them through a protocol, is there certain metrics that you're looking at on the blood work side that you can tell whether it's good or not for the patient, or maybe they should stop taking peptides? What are the markers in the blood work that you need to look for when you're on peptides to make sure that you can take them?
Well, that would be when we decide that patient wants to get on tesamorelin. We
Hmm.
have to look at the blood work. We have to look at the insulin. We have to look at the fasting glucose and IGF-1
Hmm.
because peptide that stimulates your growth hormone production have potential side effects of diabetes type 2 and insulin resistance. So it has to be really, I will have to educate the patient that you have to inject it before bed on empty stomach, 3 hours. Minimum 3 hours have to pass until after your last meal. And that, of course, we have to follow up with the blood work.
Hmm.
So if, let's say, a patient comes in and his IGF is 350, I'm not going to suggest desamorelin because his IGF is already elevated. And most likely that's a young person
Hmm.
because after 40, I don't see really IGF that high.
Hmm.
Um, what other peptides? Well, thymosin alpha, we use thymosin alpha.
Hmm.
Um,
What do you use thymosin alpha for, just for our audience?
for autoimmune conditions.
Hmm.
I have many patients with Hashimoto
Hmm.
with very high antibodies.
Hmm.
And I do see, I know there is no evidence again about that, but I do see reduction in antibodies.
Hmm.
If a person when I have a patient comes in with antibodies over 1,000, let's say,
And you're measuring this through blood work.
yes, through the blood work. Those are thyroperoxidase antibodies,
Hmm.
are very common with Hashimoto. And usually people do feel a lot of fatigue. They feel because it's a large molecules, they create a lot of inflammation in your body. It's not only thyroid is affected, it's actually your whole body will be affected. And I offer thymosin alpha as a trial. And we do have great results.
Hmm.
Reduction in antibodies definitely happen.
So let's go back to the longevity patient. So is there something that you can tell that's working for them as far as their biological age or slowing down aging, where you can say you're doing the right things, you're getting a benefit from those specific peptides that is focused on longevity to maybe slow down their aging? Is there something that you can tell
Based
us?
on the blood work marker,
Hmm.
Again, that would be cholesterol probably panel, your A1C, your fasting insulin, the improvement in those markers absolutely will tell me that it's working. That's
Mhm.
what we're doing. It's working. The protocol is working, and patients are excited to see that.
So that's interesting to hear that you can get a little bit of a background saying that this is good for a combination. Are there any others out there that you think are okay from a combination perspective?
CJC 1295 and Ipamorelin, those come as that peptide comes at, well, those two comes in already blended from when we used to have access from the pharmacy. Right now we don't. That's why we only use tesamorelin, but when blends will become available, we'll absolutely be using them.
So let's talk about more the misinformation that just gets you fired up. So, what's one health trend or claim that you see that's circulating right now that maybe just bugs you the most or it just irritates you? Is there anything out there that you're seeing a lot of noise and that you're just, it makes you kind of upset or irritates you? You get fired up for misinformation.
Well, one of them is probably peptide FOXO4-DR.
FOXO4-DR.
Yes.
Tell us about what that is and what people are saying about
That's
it.
the peptide that's supposed to remove senescent cells from your within. And people, I hear people creating protocols online. They say first you start with FOXO4, and then you introduce epithalone to, and then I'm like, to do what? To wake up the new cells. It will rejuvenate the new cells. FOXO4 has no, it's not selective. It's gonna go and remove the senescent cells, and we only know about that peptide in mouse, models. So we don't know what it's going to do with inside the human body. That's a research peptide. It's not. BPC has been around since 1993. Epithalone has been around since Havinson invented it back in USSR. Well, 1997 probably. Um, don't remember when exactly it was. But this is a very new molecule, so I wouldn't be readily injecting it to I would never inject it to myself. Or even be elaborate, sure, be elaborate. I will not be injecting it to myself. I want more studies.
Hmm.
That's a very promising molecule, of course. But again, senescent cells are also play a role. Um, FOXO4 has been studied also in oncology, but if you look at the FOXO4-DR, the people who created that walked away from the research.
Hmm.
They said it's promising, but it's intermediate. So they took another molecule similar to FOXO4, and now they're doing the research in oncology for
Hmm.
those. Not sure. We'll see.
So,
But lots of people talk about FOXO4 that you need to clean up the debris of dead cells inside of you. Like there's no macrophages that come and do that anyways.
interesting. So let's go a little bit further now. So, as far as think about being a new person that's coming into peptides, you hear about it, you start to maybe do your own research on it. Is there anything out there that you would say to our audience for the first thing you should do? Or what's the process if you're interested to try to see if they can be a benefit to you? Is it blood work? Blood work's the first thing you should do.
Well, you should work with a medical practitioner and not listen to a bro science on Instagram or TikTok. You should actually speak to the professional. And I know conventional medicine or MDs don't know much of peptides, but there are many, many practitioners like myself,
Hmm.
and I'm sure you have those on your team who can explain and lead you into that path, into that world of peptides, which is exciting, of course.
So, is there any like resources out there for people other than ChatGPT and Claude that you think people should access?
They won't understand NCBI. That's a National Institute of Health. That's a research database that I use,
Hmm.
and that's where I educate myself.
So, I want to go back to talking about how much content is out there about peptides because it's getting bigger by the day and there's a lot of information out there. So, for our listeners in the beginning, focusing more on education, let's go back to talk about what peptides are in your body and what they're doing so people understand a deeper knowledge about this before this episode is over. So, peptides, as we know it, is a naturally occurring amino acid in your body. And as you age, the peptides start to be produced or synthesized in your body less and less over time. And so the mindset is that you can now have access to potentially a product that can help you with those functions in your body, and then your body can perform at a better, pace at an age that's maybe not used to
True,
when you're older.
true.
And so Is that true? Is that accurate?
It's a very plausible hypothesis. I would say yes. From biological standpoint, our body constantly trying to reach homeostasis, and we die when that homeostasis is no longer reachable or achievable. All the systems have failed, and that happened with peptides. As we get older, the synthesis of peptide decline, just like the ATP production declines.
Hmm.
And the hypothesis by adding peptides, exogenous peptides, we restore some of the functions. Yes, I believe that's biological, very plausible.
Interesting. And so another thing that's out there that I want to bring up is that a lot of people have this misconception that is steroids the same as peptides. What is the difference between peptides and steroids?
Steroids made of lipids, peptides made of amino acids. Well, first of all, steroids are hormones. That's what people don't understand. Peptides can influence the release of hormones, but peptides are not hormones. Hormones are estrogen, testosterone, um, DHEA, can't pronounce that long name. Those are the hormones that made of lipids. Your liver produces cholesterol, and then all the steroids made of that cholesterol. And peptides are proteins, completely different structure, complete in different role in in the body. And you get peptide steroids again. I used at the gym to get bulky. Hormones. People confuse hormones and steroids, but mostly they are the same.
Can you take them together?
Yes, you can take peptides and hormones together, depending on what hormones. If it's testosterone replacement therapy, of course, and you can add some few peptides to that regimen.
So we're going to go now to a segment that I like to call rapid fire. So I was a hockey player. There was a drill that we did every practice, and you take several pucks, you line them up, and it's called rapid fire. So this is what I'm calling this segment. And
All
you're the
right.
first one to go through it, and we're calling it rapid fire. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. I just want the first thing that pops into your mind. And I know you haven't heard these questions before. So first thing that pops to mind, let me know what you think, and we'll go through these as quickly as possible with, quick answers. Okay?
Sounds
You
good.
ready? All right. So, one peptide every person over 35 should know about.
GLP-1,
Most overrated wellness trend of the last 5 years.
ice cold plunges,
Ice cold plunge. Love it. So, most underrated longevity habit that does not get credit.
resistant training, muscle
Resistance
building,
training. Love that. If you could only run one lab on a new patient for them to understand how they're aging, what is it?
fasting insulin,
What peptide are you personally most excited about?
SS31.
Thank you so much for spending the time with us here today and giving us the knowledge and the science that you've experienced in this space. I couldn't be more grateful for you to be our first episode.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that.
So, I'm Stephen Brudzewski. This is the Peptides Podcast, our first episode. We're really excited. Come back next time. We're going to have a PharmD here and we're going to continue to explore the science of better living.